You're listening to the Ask Drone U podcast. You ask, we answer your drone questions. Whether you're here to turn your passion into profit or you simply fly for fun, we're a community of learners and teachers who aspire to achieve greatness. We are
Drone U.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another awesome episode of Ask Drone U. My name is Paul.
And I'm Rob, and you're listening to episode number 353. And we thank you, as always, for spending a few minutes of your day with us.
Yes, we do. It is a beautiful 90-degree weather day. And Rob, I say all the time when people say, what is it like in Albuquerque? I finally posted a picture of the difference in temperature between Albuquerque and Phoenix, because everyone thinks that Albuquerque and Phoenix are the same thing.
Not at all.
113 degrees versus 90. I think that's a good solid 23-degree difference of why Albuquerque is better than Phoenix.
I know what I would choose.
What's that?
Where we're sitting, which would be Albuquerque.
I would go a little further north, but that's just me.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true. But and all of that said, Phoenix is a cool town. I like Phoenix a lot.
It really is. And there are a lot of cool places to fly in Arizona and New Mexico. And that brings us to today's question. With so much going on in the drone legalities arena, with so much speculation online, what can you believe? And that brought us to today's question. This is not from Rob, the guy sitting next to me.
Nope, but it is a never-ending saga as to what are the right answers to these questions.
Well, I think actually this question pertains to essentially charging for one service over another while including aerials. Can you get around the 333 like that? And we'll play the question for you. But I think, Rob, at a macro level, the FAA has said in this particular issue very specifically, you can't charge for one thing even though you're flying, and say you're not charging for flying. It's still a commercial, activity. At the same time, there is, again, no law that backs that up. So
right.
I think also that even though the FAA says one thing, they do another. And we've seen that consistently throughout the drone age. And not only that, something else that we're seeing too is, the FAA, and I think John Rupert, in tomorrow's podcast, we really get into this deep because we had Motherboard, we had Jason from Motherboard come on, talk about his articles about all of the enforcement actions against drone pilots, and none of them were for commercial operations.
Right.
And like John Rupert said, we're really living in the age where the FAA is just throwing things against the wall and seeing what sticks. So you've got, what the FAA is saying, and then you've got the reality of the situation of what's actually sticking against the wall. So even though we answer this question and say, well, technically, the FAA has put out a memo that says you can't do this, in tomorrow's podcast, we talk all about what the FAA has said and what it's actually done, because we got the Freedom of Information Act request back on what enforcements were actually going down. And I'm very happy to say, Rob, that everything that we've been preaching for the last few years has been correct. If you fly safely and you fly commercially without a 333, the chances of you getting slapped on the wrist are very, very, very low. Now, we're not saying that it's going to be that way forever. The FAA could totally change its tune once 107 comes out. And who would blame them, especially when it's only $250 at that point to get a license.
Right. So understand that even given this conversation and even given the facts as they stand now, there's some risk involved if you choose to move forward.
True.
So you just need to understand that, and I guess it comes down to how much risk is one willing to take on. And you might argue that right now there's not much risk, and certainly that would be valid, but understand there is some.
Yeah, well, I think, the argument we've heard in the years past is if you can get insurance and fly drones commercially, doesn't that say something about the industry as a whole?
Right.
Because you ask a pilot who controls aviation, is it the insurance companies or is it the FAA? And one pilot told me very specifically, who's actually a family friend, he said, the FAA can sit there and slap you on the wrist and write you a ticket when you're on the runway, but the insurance guy can make sure that you don't take off.
Sure.
And that's the difference. That being said, I know that there are times when FSDO can inhibit someone from taking off, but at the end of the day, the insurance company really has more power because it also has power over the bottom line. So
yeah, and if you don't have insurance, if I don't have insurance, I don't want to fly.
Definitely. Now, that being said, there is a level of risk, like you said, and if John Rupert were on the podcast, he could probably talk to us for an hour on all the risks that are
That
involved.
would be his intro. Love you, John.
That guy could talk, I'm telling you. But he's right too. He could say that you could be sued for negligence just by like not following or getting a 333,
Right.
or you could also prove the antithesis of that and say that
Sure.
I was following FAA guidelines even though I didn't have a 333 exemption. So anyway, we've gotten too deep already without playing the question. Let's go ahead and play the question. Today's question is brought to you by Legal Flyer. Are you a drone pilot? Are you operating under a Section 333 exemption? Then you may be familiar with Item 27, which requires you to get a property release for every flight over property.
Legal Flyer is an app for iPhone and iPad that helps you create professional property releases in less time than it takes to do a pre-flight check.
You can add your pilot info, you can sign it, hand it to the property owner for their signature. But wait a second. Legal Flyer's advanced integration automatically adds latitude, longitude, and even altitude.
Then add a panorama straight from the app. Everything drops into a single-page PDF you can share with a single tap. It's compliance at light speed. Visit LegalFlyer.com for more information or get it straight from the App Store. Legal Flyer. Property releases for professional drone pilots.
Hey guys, keep up the great work. This is Robert, and I am doing some research here about the 333 exemption, and I landed on a pretty popular website that's doing a lot of drone videography. On their charges and pricing page, they say that they actually, per FAA regulations, they say that they do not charge for the filming, but they do charge you for the editing and all of the other production work that goes along with that. Is that technically legal? Is this a way to get around the 333 exemption by not charging for the actual video footage itself and the filming time, and instead building it into the cost elsewhere along the production?
I think this is a really good question.
It is a good question. And so thank you, Robert, first of all.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you for letting us know that we're doing a good job. I will keep drinking massive amounts of caffeine to keep you entertained. Anyway, that being said, a lot of people did take this route, Rob, in the very beginning, kind of before 2014 and the interpretation of 336 came along.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people were saying, well, I'm going to fly and make videos and only charge for the editing. And even I was doing that for a long time. So it is something that people have used as an argument against, going for the 333.
Right.
But the FAA did put out a memo, and it was in the interpretation that flying some, I forget the exact terminology, I'm sure John could pull it up in a second, but essentially flying with the intent to sell any part of the footage was deemed commercial activity.
Emphasis on intent, and based on the website that he's referring to, clearly their intent was to film to sell.
Yeah.
Regardless of how they're allocating the way they're charging it.
Yes.
Right.
So the FAA very clearly says, you can't do this. But again, we're talking again about a memo, an interpretation, a policy statement. As you know, with any federal regulatory agency, policy statements can change just as frequently as you change your underwear. And I'm not kidding. I mean, there have been agencies that have had policy changes within weeks of each other.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So daily, right, Paul?
Well, if I were the FAA, I might have changed my pants a few times by now. But anyway, yes, Rob, yes. I hope they change their drawers every day as well.
Yes, me too. Yeah.
Maybe
Actually,
that's
I
why
don't
it's
care,
so
but-
stinky up in DC. Who knows?
Oh, wow.
Anyway. So the long and the short of the question is, have people done this? Yes. Has it been an argument for a very long time? Yes, it has. Does the FAA say that you shouldn't do this? Yes, they do. Now here's the quintessential question. I go back to the point of, the FAA throwing things against the wall and letting the courts decide what's actually going to stick. And the courts have decided that flying commercially is not going to stick. NTSB Judge Patrick Garrity said very clearly, you have no authority to regulate the commerce with unmanned aircraft,
Right.
but they do regulate the airspace, and safety is a very big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And they are tasked with keeping the national airspace system safe. So go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, so in tomorrow's podcast, where we have Jason from Motherboard, we actually learn that there has not been a single enforcement for flying a drone commercially, which is very interesting because, again, I go back to what we said in the beginning. There's what the FAA says, and there's what the FAA does.
Well, Although, and that's true, but I think we could also deduce that they're doing what they say in the sense of they're generally going after people that are not flying safely.
Correct.
And so the fines that have been issued, because there was another article about that right around the same time frame as the article that you're referring to, they were all safety violations, right?
So they were flying,
that is happening.
Yes, they were flying in restricted airspace. They were flying
Right.
over people. The things, again, Rob, that we've been saying in the Drone U training program for years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what I really loved about this is, what was it? 2 years ago, I said, or maybe it was a year ago. I can't remember the exact time frame, so don't quote me on it. But I said, if you remember the document 2150, I think it was change B. Anyway, the document was 2150B. Oh, yeah. Excuse me, Appendix H, and they said...
I can't believe you remember that, but go
it
ahead.
took me a while to remember that. 2150B change... anyway. It says very specifically, the direction from the FAA to FSDO directors is that they cannot go after anyone unless they cause immediate and significant harm to people on the ground or aircraft in the sky. And we've been telling people that. We've said, like, here is the evidence that says the only way that they can come after you is if you act like an idiot. And frankly, if you act like an idiot, you deserve it. So
Yeah,
let's be
absolutely.
honest. You know,
Absolutely.
I don't want to seem like the guy that's just anti-FAA. I'm not anti-FAA. I'm anti-BS. You know, I'm
Right.
like, let's get a clear, non-ad hoc response here to this whole drone revolution. I mean, it's very clear that the United States is falling further and further and further behind every week. But at the same time, it's cool to see that document that we mentioned in our classwork was also mentioned in tomorrow's podcast and was mentioned in the article that Motherboard put out.
Absolutely, absolutely. So speaking specifically to Robert's question, it sounds like what we should be saying is don't mess around. There's really no need to mess around with those kinds of manipulations of your verbiage, right? It's not going to necessarily get you anywhere. And if you ask me, you might just throw up red flags of sorts because it's clear that you're trying to manipulate the system as opposed to just going about your business flying safe and eventually getting the 107 if you're going to choose not to get the 333. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think that does it. And I think we did a good job of painting the picture on both sides. You know, again, what's being stated,
Right.
what's reality. And I'm really excited about tomorrow's podcast. I really can't tell everyone just how excited I am for episode 354, again, with Jason from Motherboard, because he just, pulls the curtain back and says, we got the feds to give us the real deal on what's going on behind the curtain, and what's going on behind the curtain is what a lot of the industry leaders have been saying for a while.
Absolutely.
And now we get that validation. So if you are listening to the podcast, make sure that you subscribe and you'll get tomorrow's episode downloaded automatically. You can also watch it on YouTube. You can watch the entire episode in video instead of just listening to the audio version. But hopefully it will it'll give you an idea what Jason looks like, and you may enjoy it a little bit more. I don't know where I was going with that.
I don't know either, but if you have a question, ask droneu.com. Check us out there. Let us know what you need to know, and we'll get it on the air just as soon as we can. We love getting your questions and appreciate everybody that has sent them in.
Also, if you're an enthusiast to drones, you love to fly, or maybe you want to turn your passion into profit, I think it's time you take a look at the Drone U membership. Why? Because you get a community of learning. You get classes, you get resources, forms, documents, and even if you want to get certified to save a little money on your insurance, you can do that as well. But where Drone U takes it beyond the traditional learning center is the community, the private community that you have access to for as long as you are a member. Now, personally, Rob, I think that's a little bit more valuable than the training itself. I know I say that because I'm one of the trainers, but there's nothing like having a positive how do I say this? These
community.
guys, it's a positive community. They build you up. It's nothing like anything you see on Facebook now. Anyway, I invite you to join that community. Just go to thedroneu.com and click Become a Member. You'll see all the cool stuff that you get with it. And if you love this podcast, you want to support it, you can support it by becoming a member, by becoming a sponsor, or just simply sharing or leaving a review to the podcast so that other people can find us as well. Rob, I think that's going to do it for us today.
Cool.
My name is Paul.
I'm Rob.
This is Ask Drone U.
We believe that videos, images, words, and sounds have the absolute power to inform, inspire, and entertain. We reject indecision, confusion, and vanity, for they work against the community. We are united under the virtues of safety and knowledge. We are a training community of learners and teachers who encourage and energize each other to achieve greatness. We are pilots, videographers, photographers, freelancers, business owners, enthusiasts, experts, and apprentices. We are creators. We are the Drone Youth.